Joan, I haven't gotten a single high five since I've been in here. Could you give me a few under the table? Everyone else is getting them.
Slap my hand under the table.
Great humans, listener like you here, and it turns out I did feel like it. Stay tuned for some review videos on books I've read in the last year or so if I feel like it.
Totally said that.
Today I'm going to be talking about and critiquing Kojiki by Keith Yatsuhashi, and the story follows Keiko. On a guided tour of Tokyo, she slips through a boundary, gets a glimpse of a fiery dude flanked by 2 dragons, and as she runs away from this, she's whisked away by her tour guide in a floating shield bubble thing. Turns out her tour guide, Yui, is the youngest of the Kami, which is a race of elemental spirits, one of whom is the fiery dude from before. Yeah, he's stuck in a thing called the boundary, and he's trying to escape. And this would be bad mojo for the world, I assume. Story unfolds from there, leaping perspectives and time periods and tragic origin stories as everybody gears up for a final showdown with Vicious, the Kami of Fire. Embarrassing confession time, I only got about 240 something pages into this thing before I gave up and skipped to the end. Now I hesitate to say it was bad, so I'll say instead a bunch of other stuff. And there are definitely a lot of elements in this story that I enjoyed, and it felt like fundamentally the author had a clear idea of what he wanted to happen. There was a basis in Japanese mythology, which I gotta admit, I don't see very often. In the backstory, we learn that the air and water kami are in love, and they want to make a bebe, but this is verboten by the head honcho kami spirit of spirit. Because apparently 2 elements can't be contained within one body. Meanwhile, Vicious, the Kami of Fire, is in love with Saren, the Kami of Water, and they're like really good friends, but she just doesn't feel the same way about him. And at her request, he manages to successfully suffuse 2 elements into one being. However, the process drives him insane, and so there's a big old fight, and they have to lock him away inside the boundary, but not for long, because the boundary's weakening. Hence our present-day predicament. Except, in the background, the head honcho kami spirit of spirit has made a bebe himself with the Kami of Light. Their daughter is Yui, the tour guide. And she's like, fine. It's also insinuated at points in the book that complementary powers can coexist within the same body. In fact, Eric and Saren have been experimenting with each other's powers, and it's been fine. Vicious's insanity notwithstanding, there didn't seem to be a big problem with getting what they wanted. The mythology wasn't explored beyond that, which is too bad because that's kind of the point of sci-fi and fantasy, is to speculate. Ask what if. And here we slip unavoidably into what didn't work out so well in the book. This is of course the point in the video where I say that, hey, this is just my opinion, I'm just critiquing for the sake of knowledge, to explore ideas more. I'm not even a published author. Or a professional, according to the various criteria for grants and bursaries that I do not qualify for. So we're just having a laugh. Good old time. Keep our minds sharp and analytical as we whittle away the days. My main critique for this book is show, don't tell, which is to say, it did tell more than it doth showed. Basically, this book could have been half the length. And that's not a sick burn, bro. It's just to say that it could have gotten where it did a lot faster. A lot of the fundamental ideas were interesting, they just weren't worth the time they took. Now, I'm not one to shit on writing a scene. You gotta do it. Feel it out till it feels right. First instinct, right instinct. That's part of the joy of writing. First draft, though, is not your final draft. After a bunch of revisions, of which there should be many, ask yourself, what does this scene do that others don't? What is its purpose? Can I live without it? Will I miss it? What is my purpose?
You pass butter.
Oh my god.
On an even more basic level, the prose in this book finds itself bogged down by overwriting. It gets caught up in describing consecutive little minutiae, something that a story editor once described to me as every little heartbeat. Janet Reed of Query Shark actually recommends that writers remove all adverbs and adjectives from their pieces in order to let fewer words stand with more strength. Let's give it a go, shall we? Example number 1. Peter gasped at the sight and dropped his empty wine glass in astonishment. You're not going to drop it out of boredom. In context, the surprise is implied. Just drop your glass, bro. If the glass even matters to the story. Instance number 2. In the span of 1 page, we have the gems, he screamed in outrage, and then shortly after, an outraged howl escaped his lungs. In this context, fight to the death. If a character screams, we can probably guess he's not thrilled about it. Trust your readers to pick up on what you're laying down. You can just say, he howled. Meanwhile, the dialogue finds itself in similar territory. It kind of veers into on-the-nose, spelling out the subtext and not allowing the audience to be able to come to their own conclusions. Which is unfortunate because that would be engaging. One such example. She laughed, the sound coming out like the ringing of clean, clear chimes. The lack of a mother's touch, I fear, has roughened her a little around the edges. Nothing a good man can't fix. Keiko shot Yui a meaningful look. True, Takeshi chuckled. So true. Women's, am I right, fellas? You can check out the Men Writing Women subreddit below, but the scene immediately continues with, now if you don't mind, I would like to have a few private words with Yui before I go. Please say your goodbyes and join Terrace in the Boundary. She promised to look after you until I can join you. As true today as when it was written. I'm a little confused here because it sounds like she's promised to look after her in like the 5 minutes it takes for him to say goodbye. But this isn't the first time that time gets confusing in this book. One Kami's henchman is said to have served him for over 600 years, but his tragic origin story takes place in the 1700s, and this book doesn't take place in the 24th century. Then again, writers can't do math. My point in all this is that it doesn't really matter, except for the fact that I'm noticing and spending more time on that than the actual story. While maintaining your own unique touch and flair, you need to be able to convey the most detail in as few words as possible. For a non-literary fiction like this, where words aren't the spectacle, forward action matters. You may need to sculpt it out of a pile of much crappier words in order to get to the good ones, but that's okay. It's called editing. Alas, I am, as previously stated, not published, so all I can say is kudos to Mr. Yatsuhashi for getting your ideas onto a page and out into the world. It reminds me of the importance of sharing my own ideas, that I can't just sit alone in my room by myself fiddling with my stories. Verdict! This might be a bit of a cop-out, but I sort of thought Kojiki would work as a script for a manga or anime, which is to say, iffy dialogue, but pretty good visuals. Problem being that, in its current state, it's a book. And no matter what you're creating, you have to play to the strengths of the medium you're in. It's not to say that there is an interplay between media, indeed, inspiration abounds, but this sort of read like a text version of a Dragon Ball Z movie, without all the sweaty, muscly man figures fighting in ever-degrading costumes over the course of their epic battles for my prepubescent self to get confused about.
Before we continue, I need to shed some of these clothes.
And yet, I was not confused. Which is to say, I was spending more time trying to make this book see itself through than this book was actually seeing itself through. It's kind of like listening to somebody describe their dream. I understand it was an epic, immersive experience for yourself, but you're not giving me enough to go on. And so, I declare Kojiki selfish in bed. Because while I encourage you to know yourself and satisfy your own needs first, if you want someone to come to your fantasy, sci-fi, or really any genre of world, you gotta be willing to include them so that they can come with you on the adventure. Thank you very much for coming with me on this this fun little literature adventure. If you have any questions about what I've discussed, or comments about how I've done it, or better yet, urban fantasy suggestions for things published in the last 5 years, feel free to, do the thing. Till then, keep safe, and I hope you find something you like out there in the noise. Fatty out. Room doesn't go that far.